one.
BCI was there immediately. They were there within the first half hour of that town hall being found that way, and they did all the forensic stuff.
So Lynda Bowers says BCI was there within the first half hour of that township being found that way. She is right. They were there from the start. However, she wants you to believe that the Bureau of Criminal Investigation ran this case from day one. The state investigators were in charge, that everything was handled by the book. But the paperwork says otherwise. What she calls an investigation was, in reality, a review, a quick double check of the sheriff's office files. That's not an investigation. That's a rubber stamp audit dressed up as justice. And Lynda Bowers knew it. She told one version to the public and another behind closed doors, depending on who was listening. A career politician. That's why I want you to hear her for yourself. What you're about to hear isn't rumor or internet gossip. It's Lynda Bowers in her own words, recorded in a private conversation that lasted more than 3 hours. The person who recorded it wants to remain anonymous, so I'll be voicing their side of the discussion. But every word you're about to hear came from Lynda Bowers. This is the version of the Bryon Macron case, unfiltered, unscripted, and as you'll see, unraveling in one contradiction at a time. I'm Scott Gardner, former cop, former homicide detective, former chief. I've lived on both sides of the system, enforcing the law and surviving its shadows. Let's start at the beginning with 67 days of silence, a body in a lake, and a trustee who couldn't stop talking. So folks, we're in post-production, and I'm going to drop this here. I want you to stick around towards the end. I have a summary and some updates that weren't originally in the first recording. For 67 days, nobody knew where Bryon Macron was. Not the sheriff's office, not BCI, not the township. When his body was finally pulled from Chippewa Lake with 6 stab wounds, the first thing Lynda remembers isn't grief. It's chaos inside the sheriff's office. Cut 2.
So we're in there, and he's talking, about the recovery and what's going to happen next, and the autopsy and how that's going to go, and where the body's at, and so on and so forth. And I find out later, Victoria knows none of this. I'm telling her, and she's getting pissed because I know and she doesn't. I can't help what the sheriff won't tell her, and she's starting to get angry because I know things. Well, I only know things because I'm there. And maybe it's because I'm a trustee, I don't know. But they should be telling her. She's right. They should be telling her. And we're yelling at them. So Costello says to Setner, Mike says, I gotta ask this. How in the hell did you people not find that body?
Yeah, how do you not?
He says, you had offer after offer after offer. And you just blew it off and said, he's not.
That's a fair in the wintertime. That's
and
fair.
And Mike says to Setner, I can remember this word for word. Mike says to Setner, that big body of water, and he points. He says, you know that big body of water lays along Cleveland shore? I think that's a big lake. And Setner says, yeah. And he says, they have equipment that they put in that water when they have a body, and they find him. That's a big lake. And Setner, who's sitting there like this, leans back in his chair. He says, well, the end up is that nothing would have changed. We'd still be where we are today. We'd have just found the body sooner. And we're thinking, and Mike and I are thinking the same thing, and all of the evidence that might have been on the body at that time that might have answered some of these questions. And when he said that, telepathy, I don't know what the hell it was, Mike and I both looked at each other, stood up at the same time, turned around, walked out and left. Never said it. We just stood up, walked out and left. And that was one of the last conversations we had about we were just pissed. We get out in the parking lot, And we're just looking at each other. We cannot believe he was that callous. The end up would be we'd be right where we are today. We'd have just found the body sooner. Like,
she describes Trustee Mike Costello shouting at Captain Setner for not finding Bryon sooner. Even inside the own building of Lafayette, their own narrative wasn't holding together. So when you hear BCI wasn't investigating, remember, they weren't the only ones standing around waiting for someone else to do the work. Right after that, the interviewer asks her about the wounds. Cut 3.
I mean, like,
the coroner's reports don't call them stab wounds. They call them blood.
One is called a stab wound. Okay, they have that on the I have that on the page. That the one in his neck is called a stab wound, and that's one of the things that they get caught up on a lot. This gets brought up a lot. How does, let me see if I can get this right, because again, I am not visual. How does a right-handed person stab themselves on the right side, coming down, and drag it in? Like, they bring that up a lot. I don't know. I'm like,
I read Lisa Duranick's report, and, you know, he suffered from hypothermia. He sat down and died on the bank when the lake rose. Because if you know anything about the lake, anybody who lives here long enough knows the lake is artificially lowered about 2.5 feet that time of year. There's plates that they move to lower the lake, so that when the spring thaw comes from the inlet, because we drain all the way from, you know, Liverpool down into this inlet. That inlet comes right out of the banks.
Did you catch that? She says the coroner's report doesn't say stab wounds. The report says 6 sharp force injuries. That's stab wounds. It's in black and white. When the paperwork speaks, it wins. Now, you decide. I'm not here to tell you what to believe. I've already uncovered contradiction in Bowers' story in the previous episode. I'm leaving it up to you to decide when and if she's telling the truth. I'll show the receipts and let the pattern speak. Lynda starts soft. Small town kindness, helping the Macrons. Cut 4.
And this is Bryon and Victoria. I always buy a table for the commissioner's ball, and I knew Bryon and Victoria couldn't afford it. So I called Bryon about a week out, and I said, hey, I've got 2 extra seats at my table, and I don't want them to go to waste. You and Victoria should come. And man, he jumped on that.
oh, I bet, you know, we can afford
$200 to go to that. How they were.
She paints herself as the charitable trustee, then mocks them for belonging to a country club. That's the pattern of Lynda. Lift you up just high enough to look down. Public saint, private scorekeeper. Then she pivots to money. 19 minutes in, she slips. Cut 5.
Well, no, he doesn't. So he started it again. Somebody that's on that page sent it to me. I didn't see it. They just sent me a message and said, he's saying that you took an illegal kickback, a commission, or a kickback from the technology park. So I got this from the county administrator. You know, there was no commissions paid to anybody. It was a donation. He talks of, this is the one that really gets me. He talks about the Nexus pipeline. It's on our property. It's on the southern boundary, which is about a mile south. About a third of it, maybe a little more, is on land that Eddie and his sister and I own jointly. And the balance of it is on that side of the road. And those 2 parcels up against, well, the one parcel in the front, the biggest one, up against the road, she owns independently. That's hers. It went with her house when they settled the estate. And then there's a piece in the back of our smaller one. So probably about a third of it we own jointly and shared. It was nowhere near $1.5–2 million, but you know, it was something. But you can't stop it. And we were not originally on the list of people that they tried to negotiate leases with. They first sent out their first notices, I believe, and don't hold me to this without me checking, 2013. And I immediately jumped into action. And the reason I did is this farm has a transmission line that comes across that property all the way through us, north to south. Just 50 feet south of my house, there's a transmission line that runs east to west. In the middle of the field south of us, there's a transmission line that runs east to west.
Right.
Those were all put in the 1950s and 60s. You know, I wasn't born yet, or I was in elementary school, so clearly not my fault. But we've had problems with them. Those older lines are a problem. So here they come again through my township. And if you look at Lafayette Township, we look like a spaghetti bowl. And I have a bad history with easements. When I was a little girl, I was probably 6.
She says, I wasn't on the Nexus list. Then a route change. Then a check. About $880,000 for a tiny piece of land. She calls herself the loudest voice against Nexus. You can oppose something publicly and still cash that check. This is where Bryon enters her story. He was the township's fire liaison, the person expected to understand pipeline impacts for the first responders. Cut 6.
But Bryon Macron was our fire liaison, so he went to that meeting with our chief. And then, you know, one of the things that I wanted him to find out, I had a list of questions. One of the things I wanted him to find out was, is there safety equipment we need? Is there special training we need? And if so, how is Spectre Nexus going to pay for that? Because
she adds, Bryon was our fire liaison, so he went to the meeting. She claims it couldn't be public because Homeland Security wouldn't allow it. However, now, self-admittedly, I'm not an expert on Homeland Security policies and regulations. But I can't find any rule that forbids local safety briefings in public. That's not safety, that's control. 56 minutes in, the line that changes everything. Cut 7.
they don't know whether we're targets too. So I took him by the elbow down the hallway and out on the front steps. And I said, humor me, run Bryon's license and see if his CCW was renewed. He runs the license. And I know about what time this was. It was about 9:30 in the morning. And I'm going to get to why I know.
She asked a deputy to run Bryon's license through LEADS, the law enforcement automated data system, to see if he had a CCW, carrying concealed weapon permit. And she says she used to be a dispatcher. If you were a dispatcher, you know that LEADS, every lookup is logged, and asking for a non-investigative check is a felony misuse. That's not curiosity. That's narrative engineering. BCI reports no firearm recovered, no CCW tied to Bryon. She tried to inject a gun into a story that didn't have one. Now she turns on the sheriff's office. Cut 8.
Why wouldn't they say on the report what color Mike's car was and what the license plate was?
And
they're lazy.
And so that's what
And
I'm
here's
saying.
the other thing. They told us about the blood, but Mike and I cannot find that in the reports. But we know what they told us, and we know how many times they told us and at different points. But none of that's in. There's an illusion that's saying that the blood didn't look right, and then another illusion that the blood was watered, but there's no reports.
Right.
We don't see that, but they told us there were reports. So where are they? We said the sheriff should have done it. He should have done it, and he didn't.
But who's to blame here? It's the sheriff's department. Just like, why did
I know. She thinks that they called me first and not her, so she's angry with me. They didn't call me. I saw the page. I knew.
Right.
They had been down there for quite some time before I got down there. But she should have been called first. She's right, but don't blame me for that. But she doesn't know those things because she never talked to me about them.
Right.
She made some assumptions and ran with them, and then Paul Hartman, little boogerhead, gets in.
Oh, that dude is...
And he starts manipulating the bejeebers out of her and telling her shit like, well, you know, the Nexus pipeline and all, and she's talking about how Bryon was so involved in the fire department. I wasn't. And Mike's getting angry with her, and I said, Mike, think about how much Bryon lied to us, and we know.
Lazy and stupid, botched scene, lost evidence. It was a horrible job. On that, Lynda, you and I agree. We split on why. She also says she and Trustee Michael Costello were summoned to a private meeting with Captain Suttner the next morning. Cut 9.
So I don't know what happened with that after that. But it's just the sheriff screwed up. So now to Suttner. Okay, so Suttner calls us.
And he asked Mike and I to come in. Now, the sheriff knows we're angry.
Oh yeah, well,
And so that's why I think Stettner called us. He kind of wanted to chill things down and make sure that we weren't going to badmouth the sheriff.
A captain meets off the record with 2 civilian trustees. That's not procedure, that's politics. According to her, he said BCI wasn't re-investigating, just reviewing. Translation, rubber stamp. She claims she, her husband, Costello, and a deputy walked back into the administration building as BCI was leaving and heard an investigator call it a sloppy stage scene. Cut 10.
When I got there, Eddie went with me because he didn't want me to go down there alone. And I called Mike, and I called either Deputy Ross or Deputy Priest. I don't know. No, it was Priest. I called Priest. And we all got there at the same time. But I had walked up onto the building first. And I asked Mike to go down there. I said, Mike, I don't want to see this building by myself. I don't want to do this. And so, but I walked up past the BCI truck as Mike was pulling in, and then Priest and another deputy, I don't know who it was, came in right behind him. And the BCI guys were closing the back of the truck. And I can't say that they were talking about our town hall. And I couldn't hear all of the words. But these were the words that I did hear. Sloppy staged scene. Come to find out, so me and Mike and the deputies go into the town hall. They had cut out big pieces of the carpet and stuff, and and the luminol was all on the wall. So by then everything was kind of purple. So it wasn't so bad.
I wasn't there, and I can't confirm whether or not the walls were purple. From the photographs from the crime scene, nothing appeared to be purple, but I can refute one thing with certainty. It was not luminol, as she states. First off, you're not going to, luminol is expensive. You're not going to spread a bunch of luminol, spray a bunch of luminol all over a wall that you can plainly see that is blood. There's no point in doing it. Luminol is used once a crime scene is cleaned up and you are trying to find blood once it's cleaned up and you can't see the blood stain. So there's no point in doing that. Second, luminol on the naked eye is not going to show purple. First off, it will emit blue, but in order to do it, you actually have to be in the dark and you have to be using a UV light source. Now, that's generally how, when you do spray or use luminol, you would spray it, you turn the lights off, you shine it with a UV light, and then if it emits blue, then you attempt to photograph the blue that's emitting. But again, it's in the dark, it's blue, and you can't see it with the naked eye walking into the town hall. So I just wanted to interject because that made no sense to me whatsoever.
So we walked into the office area where nothing was, all of the blood and stuff was in the hallway and in a small conference room at the back of that hallway. And there's nothing in that conference room except chairs and a table. But that's it. And, we had some paperwork back there that we had been working on to review some documents on, we had direct deposits due and stuff like that were laying in there. But and some Christmas stuff that we were doing for kids for the Secret Santa, but nothing, just a few things. And so then Kim comes in. She knew that we were down there. Shirley must have called her and told her. So we're all working now. It's Friday night and we're all working. So I told Kim, I said, open up the township computer and I want you to print out every single email from Bryon or any resident that was complaining about anything. And and the deputy stayed with us. We were down there until about maybe 10 o'clock at night. And then I told the deputies then, I said, Shirley and Alice, our zoning inspector, have been complaining. Somebody comes in here during the day and messes with their computers because things are changed and stuff like that. And I said, and I told my husband that. And he told me that sometimes people can partition in a computer where they can do things that you wouldn't even know is on there. So they took all of our computers. We printed everything out and then got what we needed, and then they took our computers to check them to make sure that and to check everything that was in there. We got our computers back in about a week.
So if this statement is true, she trespassed into a secured scene. If false, she fabricated a quote from state agents. Either way, a problem. No reports list civilian re-entry then. She believes the sheriff's office was incompetent. admits walking into a crime scene and gets briefed by the captain. That's not investigation. That is complete damage control. Listen up, Pinnacle Nation. If you want to keep this roll call tight, head over to www.theinfamousexchief.com. That's Command Central. From there, you can slide into Patreon. It's a monthly subscription with exclusive drops at least once a month, or lurk for free just to jump in on the polls and pretend you had a say. Discord. That's where the real chatter goes down. Think of it like the squad room. The coffee's cold, the jokes are bad, but everyone's running their mouth. And the best part, you don't need some shiny Facebook profile. You can show up as Detective Donut or Sergeant Snark or Detective Deberswitch if you want. Nobody cares. Just get in and start talking. Hit the links for YouTube, Facebook, TikTok, and Apple Podcasts. That's standard issue stuff right there. Old school? Not a problem. Email me. Feeling paranoid? Use Signal. Signal it over. Encrypted tighter than a rookie's first report. Want your voice on the record? Speak pipe. Leave me a voicemail. If it doesn't sound like you're 3 sheets to the wind, I might even use it. Got a tip on a case? Fill out the tip sheet. Be as quiet or loud as you want. Do I burn sources? Ask him. Oh, wait, you can't. Want me to cover a case? Drop it under case consideration. Or keep it simple. Buy me a coffee and grab me a Brew Loud Be Heard mug. Because this isn't just a channel, it's a shift briefing. Be loud, be heard, shake the system until the truth falls out. She says the shredding stopped after Bryon died, so he must have been the one doing it. Cut 11.
And it wasn't me, and it wasn't Mike. Bryon was shredding. Bryon was bringing stuff down to the township hall. I mean, who else? Nobody else was. And after Bryon died, it stopped happening.
So no audit, no type of attempt of inventory, no evidence bag, just accusation and a quick exit to the next claim. Then the jaw dropper. Cut 12. So remember that she's going to talk about this later on. I think I've already played it. That she talks about blood and water being mixed in a forensic report. That's what she was told. She makes this statement, and then later on, she actually confirms. Yeah, it's not in the reports. I don't know why they told us that.
Give them to me, because I'm going to take him to Sentner, and I'm going to say, tell me what these answers are.
Okay.
Because some of the stuff, for instance, then they told us when the forensic report came back on the blood that it had been mixed with water. And that's why it didn't look right.
Right.
But then this.
They told us about the blood, but Mike and I cannot find that in the reports. But we know what they told us, and we know how many times they told us and at different points. But none of that's in. There's an illusion that's saying that the blood didn't look right, and then another illusion that the blood was water, but there's no reports.
Right.
She says they told us the blood was mixed with water. Now, I'm still trying to figure out why someone would mix blood with water as a cover-up, or I don't know. The lab files don't say that. Samples tested positive for Bryon's DNA. There's nothing mentioned about water dilution, not in the public reports. This kind of invented forensic props up a preferred theory instead of following the evidence. 2 hours in, she and Costello stop talking like witnesses, and they start talking like prosecutors. Cut 13.
We had an employee that quit that came to us and told us that Bryon was doing cocaine and heroin, and that they were certain that he was hopped up all the time. Now, Bryon had some personality quirks, I'll give you that, but I never suspected drugs. And when the investigators asked us, no. They asked us drugs, gambling, women, no. None of that stuff. 2 years later.
Cocaine, lies, faked service. The tox panel is clean, and the coroner's list cause is undetermined. When evidence failed to stain Bryon, rumor did the job. So, I wanted to make sure. Let's give Lynda the benefit of the doubt for 1 second. Let's say an investigator really did tell her these outlandish things. That the blood was mixed with water, that the coroner didn't say stab wounds. There was a 4 a.m. call that never appears in the file. Here's the question that matters. Why keep spreading it? If you're told something that serious and it doesn't appear in the reports, the lab files, or the coroner's summary, you don't repeat it on a loop. You verify it or you stop saying it. Because once you know the paperwork contradicts the claim, continuing to spread it isn't a misunderstanding. It's misinformation. And the moment you learn it's false and keep going, you own it. So either the investigator never said it, or you've decided the myth is more useful than the truth. Pick one, Lynda. Here's where the Disinfo Corps sings. Great investigation. Recently, an ex-prosecutor from Forrest Thompson's office jumped online to call the case airtight and anyone questioning it conspiracy theorists. Let's measure. Great. Unknown DNA on the towel, unknown DNA in the office door handle. Bloodstain analysis states that most likely Bryon did not do this himself. Coroner says it's undetermined and there's no weapon. Now, on my screen, this was on my Facebook page because it was truly disturbing to me. So, T.J. Murray, apparently, again, used to be a prosecutor for Forrest Thompson. So, T.J. Murray comments, actually, it is solved. Someone had actually screenshot it and sent it to me. So, I came on and responded, can't wait to see those receipts. Now, at this point, I had no idea who he was. But Tentacle Nation was quickly abreasting me of who he was. Then he goes on, and he doubles down. Anonymous number 363, I don't know who this is. They're responding to him. I think TJ actually thinks that it's me at some point. I have no idea why I'm posting from... He at one point even calls me out here, and I said, hey, I'm posting on my platform's Facebook page. I don't know why you think I'm posting anonymously. But he says, no, there's a difference of opinion except amongst anonymous conspiracy theorists. Now, how disturbing is that? And again, it gives you the mindset of the investigators. Now, again, and the prosecution. Now, to me, his profile is locked down, but however, Tentacle Nation is strong. A mutual friend of TJ sent me his friends list, and it wasn't surprising to see that he was friends with many of the Medina County Sheriff's Department personnel that have been directly involved with this case. Cut 14.
It's because they're sloppy and lazy. They did a terrible job.
And that.
So, TJ, even Lynda says they did a horrible job. That's the irony. Her critique and their praise can't both be right, but they both bury the questions. If it was so great, why are we still reading unknown number 1 and unknown number 2? Why did the sheriff's office ask BCI for a review instead of a fresh investigation? Because in Medina County law enforcement, great doesn't mean solved, it means silenced. When Lynda is pressed on the 6 wounds, Lynda pivots to hypothermia. So let's talk about biology. 67 days in a lake, epistasis, freeze-thaw, emaciation, silt abrasions, bacterial activity, and yes, scavenging. We've talked about it. It's in a complete episode on its own. If you haven't watched it, please go back and do so. If the working theory is he bled, wandered, and died of hypothermia, explain the lack of typical aquatic and or shoreline scavenging markers reported in the public files. Explain how a right-handed man gave himself 6 sharp force injuries to the neck, and we write it off as exposure. If you believe hypothermia, show the chain of evidence that makes the wounds irrelevant. If you can't, stop using winter as a band-aid for contradictions. And just for the record, there's nothing in the autopsy report that indicates hypothermia. So, Lynda claims at 4 a.m., Bryon is attempting to call Victoria. She says she doesn't even think Victoria knows about this. But that's not what the phone records show. Cut 15.
That's
When
because there's towers down there.
Mm-hmm.
Would his phone ping from it? Because here's what the BCI investigators told us, that throughout the night, Bryon was trying to call Victoria and there was no answers.
I don't know if Victoria knows that.
That's what the investigators told us.
There's no matching call record in the file for any outgoing calls. Everything doesn't line up what she describes. Hearsay is not evidence. Near the end, she shifts to image management, being attacked online, being misunderstood, and protecting Bryon's girls. Cut 16.
They're decent folks. But what they've done is unleashed kooks on Mike and I. And these kooks are not such nice people. I don't know I only know who one of them is. And him I'm not afraid of. And let me tell you, when the police identified him, before they talked to him, they knew who he was because he's got quite the record. They asked me, they said, how do you want to handle this? And I said, I want you to handle it the way you would any other case. And they told me, I'm coming for you first, you fucking scumbag whore, is alarming to me. I know what he means, especially when he's got a record of felonious assault, aggravated assault, and kidnapping. That's a little scary to me. But those words in and of themselves may be difficult to prosecute, but we'll do it. That's what you want us to do. I said, I want you to handle it the way you would any other case. And they told me that typically they would talk to him. And they said he won't admit it, but he'll be on notice that we know. And in this case, we're also going to go talk to his parole officer, and it's up to his parole officer what.
So once I have the actual facts in front of me, I'm going to come back on this topic because the party that shared this recording with me utmost denies that this occurred. That party states that they have looked at the records and that's not how this occurred. So I'm going to actually get the records. We're going to come back and circle to this because, again, this might be another point of Lynda embellishing, victimizing herself. But again, I'm not going to comment on specifics because I don't have the report in front of me. The pattern from start to finish: insert yourself, rewrite what you don't understand or don't like, blame the dead for the holes in your story. For the record, the files still say what they said in 2017. Case undetermined. No weapon, unknown DNA, still unknown. Now, again, there's 3 hours worth of this conversation, and she is, quite frankly, all over the place. I'm thinking of going back and editing out, again, the voice of the party that wishes you to remain anonymous. And there's some conversation that I don't feel particularly like outing Lynda on. There's some medical things that she discusses relative to her family. I'll probably edit those out, but I will at some point somehow put this entire conversation up again. So I show receipts. You're more than welcome to review it at some point yourself. Now, as many of you probably are aware, I try to stay out of the politics of everything, but unfortunately, with investigations, a lot of times accountability and corruption investigations, they bleed into this political arena. So again, I don't pay a lot of attention to what's happening currently. There's a bunch of discussion in Lafayette Township relative to this Ohio checkbook. I found it very interesting. This was sent to me. And again, originally I wasn't going to use it, but the more I think about it, it does tie into this Bryon Macron case. So we're looking at, apparently they had this checkbook back in previous administrations when Lynda Bowers and Michael Costello were there. And if you look at the document here, and this was a screenshot from 4/22/2002, you can see the last time it was updated was July 12th, 2017. Now, the reason that I bring this up, and the reason I think that it's important to bring up, is, again, we were talking about the covert cameras, all of the weirdness that, again, seems to be following this disinfo cartel around. Had these purchases been entered into this transparency, and I agree. Just personally, I think it's a great concept and a great idea to have this transparency for local government, for everybody to go in and look and see what your local government is paying for. But you can plainly see that it wasn't being updated back from the previous administration. Hadn't been updated since 2017 of July. So I found that very interesting. I just wanted to throw that in there. So a couple of what I'll refer to as a segment called follow-up. If you didn't know, follow-ups are generally something that police officers, detectives do. So you get an initial report and you conduct a follow-up, or you do something to investigate further something that happened. It could be something as simple as an accident where you follow up with perhaps a witness that left the scene or something and couldn't be on scene, so you follow up with that witness. Or follow-ups can be pretty much everything or anything. So I'm going to refer to this as follow-ups. So the first thing I just wanted, this was actually posted on our Facebook page for Bryon Macron, the Bryon Macron Medina County Mysteries Facebook page. There was a comment, and I think it actually has been stricken, because if you, I have strict orders to the moderators and administrators, and thank you, moderators and administrators of the page. I have strict orders that if someone gives a statement and can't back that statement up with some sort of receipt. Now, it's one thing to say, hey, we're talking about a theory here, this could have happened. Everybody knows, okay, it's a theory. But when you place something as a fact, or you make a statement on something, you better have receipts to back it up. And so my moderators and admin, what they'll do is they give the party, hey, you have 24 hours to back up your statement. Otherwise, we're going to delete it. So I think this actually has been deleted, but there was a post relative to, I find it interesting that Macron was absent for a lot of the... All right, so this is the document that I was looking for. So someone actually took the time to chronologically, and this is not just for this year, it actually goes back, this document that was sent to me, but they list all of the meetings and sort of give you, a synopsis of what each meeting was about. If we look at this document here, there are 11 meetings, and of those 11 meetings, 5 of them are regular meetings. The other meetings are special and emergency meetings. Now, what does this mean, and what relevance does this have? Someone had made a statement that, well, Bryon was absent on a lot of these meetings. Well, governance in this type of scenario, many, village council, township trustees, they're not full-time. Even in East Cleveland, their council was not full-time. So people have regular jobs. So I find it interesting because someone had made a comment, obviously, again, that Bryon wasn't present for a lot of the meetings, and they thought that was odd. But if you look, again, here, if you look, only 5 meetings were regular, meaning those were the meetings that he knew about, beforehand. And 6 of those meetings were special or emergency, meaning that 2 parties, in this case, we're talking about Lafayette Township, in this case, 2 trustees voted to have some sort of special meeting. Now, it's very possible and plausible that Bryon was unable to attend these meetings because he traveled a lot. So I thought that it was sort of interesting. Somebody had sent me this document. That's basically what they stated. Hey, Bryon worked a full-time job, and this has, a lot of people will come out and say, hey, well, this is, the family. It wasn't even sent by the family. There's a lot of people, folks, that are very invested in this case, obviously. That's why we keep talking about it. It's why we keep breaking it down as deep as we are. There is a ton of people, and I just wish that the governance that were, to be Forrest Thompson, Terry Grice, I wish that they would become aware of how many people are vested in and interested in this. So I just wanted to throw that in. Now, on to other follow-ups. I've gotten a couple comments and questions relative to a statement that I had made, I think it was the last episode, when I was talking about public records request and filing a lawsuit against Lafayette Township, and I didn't want to do that. So I don't think I made myself clear because there was a lot of confusion and questions. So what happened is there are documents that I know where when I was doing the Nexus pipeline, and again, I'm not, disclaimer, again, I don't know that the Nexus pipeline had anything to do with Bryon's disappearance or death. But when I was doing my investigation, trying to, I noticed that the township trustees kept using their personal email accounts. Now, just to allow everybody the understanding, using your personal email account in government is not necessarily, there's nothing necessarily nefarious about it. There's nothing illegal about it. It's something that I would highly not recommend doing. In East Cleveland, I would even tell officers when they're maybe on an accident scene or a shooting scene, something of that nature, they're using their personal camera to take photos. I would often admonish them, because what happens when you use your personal devices, you use your personal email, those become subject to public records. So what happened in this case, just as a prime example, this was a newsletter that Lynda Bowers apparently was sending out, and you can see that it's coming from her private email address. So I don't want to totally belabor, I already did this on a previous segment. I had public records requests because I actually have specific from other parties. I'll just put it that way. Other parties have given me emails that Lynda and Mike Costello have sent relative to the Nexus pipeline using their personal email accounts. Now, in order to compel or get those records, I have to go to the township. These are now private citizens. Lynda Bowers and Mike Costello are private citizens at this point. So I actually sent them certified a preservation request, basically stating, hey, if you have these still, don't destroy them. If you do, there could be civil consequences. So I then emailed Lafayette Township stating, hey, I want these email exchanges that in some cases, I already have. All right. And, but I want you to get them, because this is when ex-trustee Bowers and ex-trustee Mike Costello were Lafayette Township trustees. The way this works, I would have to, if I wanted to push this issue, because the response from Lynda Bowers stated that she didn't have anything, which is utter insanity. Or she also made some sort of comment, I think, relative that she would, anytime she got an email, she would forward it or print it, which is total, it's asinine. It didn't happen. There are so many emails and documents. I'm sure she did not forward or print each one. In order for me to attempt to get these records, I would have to initiate a lawsuit against Lafayette Township. Lafayette Township then would have to sue Lynda Bowers and Mike Costello and compel them to produce the records. So that's what I was talking about. I just wanted to, apparently there was some confusion on that. I've actually had several people ask me about that. My point is that I have no intention of causing undue issues for Lafayette Township. So in order for me to get the records, I would have to sue Lafayette Township. They would probably have to get some sort of attorney unless the prosecutor would represent them. And I don't want to go down that path. My platform is not about being punitive to township governments. That, my platform is about accountability. If Lafayette Township was doing something incorrectly or something, then yes, by all means, I would sue them. But in this case, I'm just looking for the records. It's not their fault that the ex-trustees, Lynda Bowers and Michael Costello, were not transparent and did not maintain these records in Lafayette Township's forum. So I just don't want to sue Lafayette Township. I just wanted to take a couple of minutes and explain that again. If there's one thing consistent in every version of Lynda Bowers' story, it's her access. She isn't a bystander talking about what she heard. She's a township trustee who seemed to have a direct line to law enforcement, a personal stake in township projects, and a habit of speaking as if she were part of the investigation team. She says she met privately with Captain Setner the morning after the body was found. She says investigators briefed her. She says she was told details that never appear anywhere in the official files. And every time she repeats those details, the story shifts just a little further from what the documents actually show. This isn't cooperation, it's confusion, because when elected officials start acting like investigators without the authority, the story stops being about evidence and starts being about access, information. Think about the overlap in her roles. She's a township trustee handling local policy. She's a property owner involved in the Nexus pipeline route. A familiar voice to deputies and county staff. While she was privately criticizing the sheriff's office, she was also leaning on that same department for information. While she told residents she wanted transparency, she was sitting in private meetings that excluded the public and family. And in her retelling, those moments all blur together. The official and unofficial, the public and the private. That blur is where the facts get lost, because once people believe you're in the know, they stop checking what's actually written down. They just believe you. So let's lay it out clearly. She describes photographs, evidence tags, conversations that aren't logged anywhere. No report lists her as authorized at a crime scene, yet she speaks as if she stood inside the crime scene tape. Maybe every investigator forgot to write it down, or maybe she wasn't there. Either way, the record doesn't match the story. What this reveals isn't a villain, it's a pattern of access, of influence, of someone who always seems to be just close enough to the evidence to narrate it, but never close enough to document it. That's how small town stories grow legs. Someone with a title starts filling the silence. The gaps between fact and assumption get smaller until the assumptions sound like fact. And by the time anyone checks the paperwork, the myth has already taken hold. That's what happened here. The public heard confidence and mistook it for certainty. Lynda spoke with authority, but authority and accuracy are not the same thing. When the sheriff's office finally closed the case, she echoed their conclusion word for word, not because she solved anything, but because her version had already become the loudest one in the room. So as you reflect on what I've shown you in the recording, keep one question in mind. Was Lynda Bowers investigating a mystery or narrating a version she helped create? So there's the truth under the spin. People aren't coming forward to start rumors. They're coming forward to end them. And in this county, you don't need a cover-up when incompetence does the job for you. They said it was a great investigation. They said it was suicide. They said stop asking questions. And yet here we are, still asking. If you watched this far, you already know the truth isn't buried in the lake. It's buried in the paperwork, or lack thereof, that they don't want you to read or hear about. Be loud, be heard, shake the system until the truth falls out.